Welcome to the Kitsap Publishing Deep Dive podcast with myself, Jack Bennett, and Emily Waters. Join us as we explore books, current events, history, politics, health, and more. Let's dive in.
So we're diving into Zen and the art of making a Morris chair. And I have to admit, when I first picked this up, I was thinking, okay, good craftsmanship and all, but is this really just about building a chair? You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
It seems like such a niche topic, but
Yeah.
you and I both really got drawn into this one.
We really did.
There's a lot going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely.
This book, it's part memoir, part woodworking guide, but it really got us thinking about anytime we try something new, anytime we try something creative. What about you? What were your first impressions of the book?
You know, it's fascinating how the author Michael Gafner uses this whole chair-making process as a metaphor for personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't shy away from the tough parts either.
Right.
You know, the self-doubt, the setbacks, those moments where you just want to chuck the entire project out the window.
Yeah, you just want to give up.
Totally.
And I think we've all felt that at some point, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's a DIY project, learning a new recipe, even like writing code for the first time.
It's universal.
It's totally universal. And one thing that really resonated with me was how Gafner talks about becoming known as the chair guy.
Right.
It's like this whole identity shift that happens because he's so passionate about this project.
It's fascinating how our passions can change how other people see us and even how we see ourselves.
Totally.
It makes you wonder, like, has there ever been a time when you dove headfirst into something you loved
Yeah.
and it totally changed your whole social landscape?
Oh, for sure. It happens. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not so much.
Right.
But Gafner doesn't just focus on the external changes. He also talks about shifting his own expectations too.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. Remember that whole story about the lampshade?
Oh, yeah, the lampshade. That was
Well,
a good one.
Tell me that didn't resonate with you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He almost bit off more than he could chew with that intricate lampshade
Yeah.
right before trying to tackle a Morris chair.
It's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Pace yourself.
Exactly.
And that's such a good reminder for all of us, especially when we're diving into something new.
For sure.
Don't try to build the Taj Mahal
Right.
on your first try. Start small. Gain some confidence.
Small wins.
Whether it's, baking sourdough for the first time or finally like organizing that junk drawer.
Exactly.
Those small wins really do pave the way for the bigger ones.
Absolutely.
And that's something that Gafner really emphasizes throughout the book.
He got.
It's about those small victories.
Yeah.
But, speaking of challenges, one of the things that I really appreciated about this book was how, honestly, Gafner tackles fear.
Oh, yeah.
The fear that comes with learning and creating something new. He names it all. Fear of judgment, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of not measuring up.
It's all there.
He really puts it all out there.
He does.
He talks about being terrified about what other people in his woodworking class would think, especially when his chair was taking longer than everyone else's.
Oh, I felt that.
Right.
So relatable.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of comparing your own progress to everyone around you. Thinking like, oh, I'm not good enough, or look how far along they are and I'm still here.
It's that comparison game.
It is. And Gafner really hits on this brilliantly. But we are so often our own harshest critics.
The worst.
Remember when he was talking about the pressure he put on himself to be perfect?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's almost crippling.
It can be.
And he recognized that. And I think a lot of us do too.
Yeah.
That striving for this kind of flawlessness,
Right.
it can actually hold us back.
It can really paralyze you.
And that leads us to another kind of fear that Gafner grapples with, and I think we all do too.
Okay.
And that's the fear of taking the wrong path.
Right.
The fear of messing up so badly you've ruined the whole project.
And you know what's interesting is that none of the chair plans that Gafner finds are actually complete.
Oh, really?
He has to piece them together from all these different sources.
Wow.
It's like a puzzle.
It's like a creative scavenger hunt almost.
Exactly.
And that actually reminds me a lot of how you approach these deep dives. You're gathering all these insights from all these different places.
I do love my research.
You're like the king of research. I love it.
Well, somebody's got to do it right.
That's right. And it's interesting because it really highlights how sometimes there is no clear roadmap
There really isn't.
when it comes to these creative pursuits.
No.
Whether you're building a chair like Gafner or even like putting together a podcast episode,
Right. You just have to kind of feel your way through it.
you kind of have to trust your gut.
Absolutely.
Be willing to experiment and maybe make a few mistakes along the way.
You're going to make mistakes.
Which is fine.
That's how you learn.
It's all part of the process. And that's where I think Gafner's insights on imperfection really hit home for me. He has this whole section on the beauty of letting go of that need for everything to be flawless.
Letting go of perfection.
And that was huge for me. I don't know about you.
Huge.
But, that was a real aha moment for me. Do you remember when he talks about Gustav Stickley?
Oh, yeah, the arts and crafts master.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Gafner finds out that even Stickley's pieces weren't perfect.
Gaspers.
Right. It's like
Yeah.
finding out that your favorite chef burns dinner sometimes.
He makes them human.
Exactly.
It makes them relatable.
And Gafner talks about seeing this closet door in Stickley's home that was cut at this odd angle because the foundation had settled.
Oh, no.
But instead of rebuilding the entire thing,
Right.
they just trimmed the door.
They worked with it.
They worked with it.
I love that.
And I love that too, because it's this idea that you don't have to scrap the whole project.
Right.
Just because there's a little imperfection.
Just embrace it.
Embrace the imperfection.
Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes those imperfections become part of the story.
They do.
Or the charm. I mean, think about those pieces of furniture that are perfectly polished, mass-produced. You see them in catalogs.
Yeah, they all look the same.
They're fine. They just don't have a lot of soul.
No character.
Give me something with a few dings and dents. A wonky drawer that sticks a little bit. A
little bit of history.
A little history. Those imperfections tell a story.
They do.
They make you wonder, who owned this before me? How was it used?
Exactly. Where has this piece been?
Exactly. And I think that's what Gafner's tapping into. It's that wabi-sabi concept, right?
There you go.
Finding the beauty in imperfection in the natural flow of life, even when things get a little messy.
It's embracing the perfectly imperfect.
Yes. And connecting that back to our work, to our lives, to everything.
Everything we do.
And I think that's so powerful. And, it's interesting because he's also giving us permission to release that pressure that we were talking about.
Yeah.
To be perfect.
Which can be so freeing.
It can be so freeing.
It can be
because it
nice.
can also be really paralyzing.
Oh, absolutely.
I can't tell you how many times I've abandoned a project.
Oh, yeah.
Because that voice in my head is it's not good enough, start over.
Inner critic is brutal.
It is. And Gafner's approach is so liberating because it gives you permission to just create.
It does.
And it reminds us that mistakes are inevitable.
They are.
They're not failures.
Right.
They're opportunities to learn and grow.
Absolutely.
Speaking of mistakes, though, remember that router incident he described?
Oh, gosh, yes.
That was a close one.
Talk about a nail biter.
Yikes.
He almost ruined this key piece of wood by using the wrong tool.
Could have been disastrous. But here's the thing. It's not really about the mistake itself. It's about how Gafner responds to it.
That's the important part.
He talks about these mishaps as being crucial steps in developing resilience, which is essential for any creative endeavor.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like that whole falling off the horse and getting back on thing, right?
Exactly.
Because in any creative process, I don't care if you're building a chair or writing a novel or even starting a business, things will go wrong. It's inevitable.
Absolutely.
But it's how we respond.
Right. It's how we learn from those mistakes that ultimately defines us. And that's where I think Gafner's overarching message really comes in, this idea of belief.
It's not just about believing in your skills, though, is it?
It goes deeper than that.
It does.
It's about believing in your vision.
Yeah.
Believing in the value of what you're creating, even when it's hard.
Especially when it's hard. Because it will be. It'll test you.
Oh, absolutely.
But he could have taken shortcuts with that Morris chair.
He could have.
He could have made it easier on himself, but he didn't.
He didn't.
He believed in doing it the right way, the authentic way.
Yeah, hard way.
Even if it meant more time, more effort, more struggle. And that comes through in the book. You can just tell.
You can feel it in his descriptions of the finished chair.
Exactly. All that care and intentionality that went into every single detail.
It's inspiring.
It really is. And that's something we can all strive for in our own lives, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just about woodworking or chair making. It's about how we approach everything.
It's a philosophy.
It is. It's about showing up with that intentionality, that commitment to excellence.
Right.
Whether it's in our work, our relationships,
Yeah.
Even just how we choose to spend our free time.
It's about being present.
Being present, exactly. And it's funny because we started this conversation talking about Zen and the art of making a Morris chair.
And a book about building a chair.
It's a book about so much more than that.
It really is.
We ended up talking about creativity, resilience, overcoming fear, self-doubt, the value of imperfection.
And ultimately, the courage to create.
The courage to create and to believe in ourselves.
To believe in the process.
Exactly. So I'm curious for anyone listening, what will you create? What's been calling to you? Waiting for you to silence that inner critic and just begin.
What's that one thing you've been putting off that you're finally ready to dive into?
Maybe this conversation was the nudge you needed?
Thank you for listening to the Kitsap Publishing Deep Dive Podcast. Emily Waters and I will see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.